So today we're going to talk about dolls that created riots, mobs, an FBI investigation, and that doll is the Cabbage Patch doll. Now, the Cabbage Patch Kids have a bit of a fraught history, so I'm going to be covering that, and it's going to be fun. A lot of people find that the Cabbage Patch Kids are ugly. Some people even find them hideous, but they were wildly popular in the 1980s. They had unique, chubby moon shaped faces, yarn hair in a variety of styles and colors, and soft, pudgy cloth bodies. And then different variations of this doll came out over the decades since, as well as a ton of other products like actual baby diapers, accessories for the dolls and for the children. The Cabbage Patch Kids came with some mythical lore also, or some might say just great marketing. So it was said that a young boy named Xavier was playing outside one day when he was approached by a mythical creature called a bunny bee. And like the name would suggest, it was a bunny and it had wings like a bee. Bunny bee. Now the bunny bee, it flew all around Xavier, buzzing around him and beckoning him to follow. So Xavier did follow, and he was led through a dazzling waterfall, through a cave that was filled with crystals, out into a big, beautiful cabbage patch. And he saw children and babies all throughout the patch. And there were bunny bees that were flying over the patch and they were sprinkling this magical crystal dust on them. And as Xavier stood watching in awe, a young boy ran up to him and introduced himself as Otis Lee. And Otis Lee went on to explain that he was one of the Cabbage Patch Kids. And then Otis went on to explain also that the magic dust that was being sprinkled, it was actually being sprinkled over Mother Cabbage, and that's to help the Cabbage Patch Kids to be born and to grow. And then he asked Xavier for his help in finding all of the Cabbage Patch Kids' homes, because I guess the mother cabbage abandons them immediately upon birth. So Xavier, he thought about it, and then he accepted his lifelong mission of finding these kids homes. And he declared to Otis that he would build Babyland General. A little heavy handed there, but a place where all of the children could live happily until they're adopted into loving homes. So that's the backstory of the Cabbage Patch Kids, their lore, or their marketing. So now I'm going to go into the history of the franchise because it's kind of controversial. So the Cabbage Patch Kids that we know today that were mass produced by a company called Coleco originally were not called that. The dolls that were sold under Coleco were said to have been created by a man named Xavier Roberts, whose signature is on the left butt cheek of every Cabbage Patch Kid. It actually goes beyond Xavier Roberts, though, so we have to also talk about a woman named Martha Nelson Thomas. Now, Martha was an American folk artist who lived in Kentucky, and she created these dolls, which she called doll babies, in the early 1970s, which ultimately became the inspiration for the Cabbage Patch Kids. The doll babies were soft sculptured dolls, basically meaning that they were like handmade out of cloth and sewn. And she would sell her doll babies at local craft art fairs in Kentucky. The doll babies had the signature round faces, usually with close set eyes, a pinched nose, and dimpled cheeks. And each doll baby that Martha made came with important papers, as she called it, which basically was like a birth certificate. There was also usually a handwritten letter, I believe, from the perspective of the doll baby, and then also like a card with their likes and personality. Now, while she was selling her dolls at these fairs, she hadn't put her signature on them or anything like that because she thought that would take away from the feel of the doll. She really wanted the doll babies to be like real to a child, like they would be adopting a sibling into their family. So Martha's art and her dolls clearly meant a lot to her. She put a lot of effort into making them, and you can tell that a lot of love and effort went into every creation that she made. So when she passed away in 2013 from ovarian cancer, all of her favorite dolls attended her celebration of life. They also, her husband invited people who were given dolls also to bring dolls by Martha to bring those dolls to the funeral. Now, where Xavier Roberts comes into the picture is that he was also an artist who would travel to these local art fairs. And he also was a manager of a craft store. So he would go to these fairs and he would buy products that he could then bring back to the store. And that's where he met Martha in 1976 when he was 21. And he was very fond of her doll babies that she was selling. So he asked if he could actually buy some of them to sell back in Georgia where he was living and working. Martha initially agreed, but later took that back. And so when he no longer had a supply of the dolls, he began producing the soft sculpture dolls himself in 1978. And he called those dolls Little People instead of doll babies. And the Little People dolls were not sold, but they were also rather adopted into homes. And just like Martha's dolls, Robert's dolls also came with adoption papers and a birth certificate. Then him and the friends also converted an old medical hospital into what they called the Babyland General Hospital. Basically, that was set up as like a tourist attraction and a shop, and it was set up like a real hospital. So the workers there, for example, they wouldn't call the dolls dolls, they would call them babies, and they'd be dressed up as nurses.
Where are these little people made?
They're not made, I'm sorry, they are delivered from a cabbage patch. The cabbage patch is located far in the North Georgia mountains, and I can't reveal where it's located exactly.
You don't say made?
No. DOLLS is a dirty word here.
So basically, it was all like a real hospital, and it still exists today. And you can visit it, and you can see live actual Cabbage Patch births. So Xavier, he was really successful with his Little People dolls. He was featured in numerous publications like the Atlanta Weekly and the Wall Street Journal, and this created a higher demand. So he was struggling to meet that demand eventually. I believe in 1981 or 1982, a licensing agent named Roger Schlafer, he went to the Babyland General Hospital, and he was really taken aback by it all. He was seeing, the Cabbage Patch with baby heads coming out of it, and he thought it was very weird, but he also found it a little bit, charming. And so he negotiated with Xavier Roberts, and Roberts ended up selling the licensings of the dolls to, I guess, Robert and to Coleco. I don't really understand how company stuff works. That's not in my wheelhouse. Just know that he basically started producing dolls with Coleco. And from there, they also changed the name to Cabbage Patch Kids instead of Little People because there was already a toy line out that had the same name. Now, I've tried finding the origins of like the Cabbage Patch marketing, and I can't find much. Xavier Roberts said in his $1 billion Babies documentary that the idea came from his childhood and being told that babies come from cabbage patches. And so I looked into it, and I believe it's also a Scottish legend where kids would place Cabbage Patch leaves outside their homes when they were asking for a baby sibling to be delivered by a fairy. So there's always been mythical tales, of course, that have been told to kids about birth, so I assume that it might be like an Appalachian folk tale as well. Now, the design team at Coleco also wanted to create vinyl-headed dolls instead of, completely soft sculptured dolls. And these new dolls were also smaller in comparison to the soft dolls, who were significantly bigger and chubbier. And also, of course, the dolls were now produced in China, mass-produced, rather than the handmade, like Martha's doll babies, and obviously they were much cheaper now at around $20 to $25 retail. Now, going back to Martha again, you may be wondering what became of this whole situation because he basically took her work and profited off of her vision. And one of her friends, Guy Mendes, was furious on her behalf, and he speaks out in the Billionaire documentary and also the Vice one that's on YouTube about how Xavier Roberts passed the idea off completely as his own. And he said in 1979, "I am the first, to my knowledge, to have conceived and made an infant-sized soft sculpture baby with human features, such as a belly button, derriere, and skin coloration, such as freckles." So originally, he really was saying that it was completely his own vision, basically, that he came up with it all.
How did you come up with this idea?
Well, in the beginning, I was learning soft sculpture. I was in college taking different art classes, and I learned soft sculpture. And I was really just stitching and trying to capture a newborn baby's look.
And like Guy Mendes went on to explain too, it wasn't just the doll itself, though, because yes, soft sculpture existed prior to Martha doing it, but it was the idea of adoption and it being a real baby and then a real family member and also having birth certificates and adoption papers and all of these things. Martha spent days and weeks working on each doll baby and honing her craft, like going from button eyes to eventually hand painting the eyes so that it would look more real for kids. And Martha also recounted her memory of meeting Xavier Roberts, saying that she later became uncomfortable when she was taking a tour of his gift shop because he pointed out an artist's work and he told Martha that he no longer carries that person's work, so he just makes it himself instead. And at that point, she became uncomfortable and she refused to supply him with any more of her doll babies. So when Martha and them found out that he was selling these Cabbage Patch Kids now, her friends encouraged her to seek legal help. And so she did get a lawyer who helped her in trying to prove that he stole the idea. But unfortunately, she didn't have a copyright on the dolls originally. And by that time, Xavier Roberts had already got the copyright to that idea and to the dolls. And then in the Vice documentary, her husband Tucker Thomas explains that they also settled outside of court in 1985. He couldn't say the actual amount that they got, but Martha and them said that it was enough to pay off their kids' college, and so she was content with that ultimately. And he also explained that it wasn't just the money to Martha, it was the fact that her original idea of these doll babies felt corrupted because now they were commercialized when originally she had put so much care and creativity into making each doll. And not only that, now they're selling them with adoption papers and all of those things that she originally had the idea of. I have to see if I can get it, if I still have access to the documentary because I rented it, but she gave a letter. She gave a doll baby to her lawyer and she wrote a little letter again from the perspective of the doll baby. And I was tearing up while he was reading it, and he also was tearing up. And basically, she was just like thanking him, but from a kid's, I'm tearing up again. Oh my God. And then this is the letter that Martha gave him from the doll baby that she gifted to him as a thank you. And he still has them in his office. So they've been there for over 30 years. But yeah, basically the letter was saying, like, hi, Jack, my name is JW. Martha said this is the perfect place for me to come to learn all that legal jargon stuff. So just really creative and cute. And like I said, he was tearing up. And I really would recommend watching the Billionaire Baby documentary and also the Vice documentary that's on YouTube. Basically, you could tell how much like love and effort she put into the dolls, and that was her way of, saying thank you and showing love to people, I guess, making these doll babies. So yeah, that's the origin story of the Cabbage Patch dolls that we're familiar with today. Something I find interesting is that both Xavier and Martha lost a parent at a young age. So I think Xavier was 5 when his dad died, and then Martha was 8 when her dad passed away. And Martha had said that she always felt more comfortable around children rather than being around adults. She liked listening to children and understanding them. Her son Seth had theorized that the age of being 8 might have been locked in her mind a bit, and so that allowed her to be just more creative. Now, Xavier Roberts was definitely more of a businessman, but it does make you wonder also if he's also connected to dolls and the idea of childhood. Maybe, I don't know, maybe I'm making shit up, I don't know. Later on in the Billionaire Babies documentary, Xavier did admit that he got the inspiration from Martha and gave her credit for that, so there is that at least. Now, when the Cabbage Patch Kids hit the shelves in 1983, it caused absolute mayhem in retail stores and malls. Almost $3 million were purchased by the end of that first year, and people really lost their damn minds. They went nutty for these dolls. So many moms and grandmothers were trying to get the Cabbage Patch Kids for their kids for Christmas.
Have you been standing in since 4 o'clock this morning? It was worth it. I got one. Why? Well, why? Because I have a granddaughter that's heart and soul, Melissa France, and she is just patiently waiting for her birthday.
There was one woman who told reporters that, little kids believe Santa can do anything, so that's why she has to get out there and get the doll or Santa's going to be ruined. So ultimately, the marketing for the product was great. Even Martha's husband noted that in the Vice documentary. And so these dolls were in super high demand. People were camped outside for hours in freezing weather. They were driving across state lines to try to find stores that were in stock. Stores would get hundreds of calls a day asking if the dolls were in stock. And since a lot of the dolls were sold out, fabric stores and whatnot, they began selling patterns that grandmas and moms could buy. And so a lot of people were making their own dolls as well. In some places, there were waiting lists with 1,000 or more names waiting. And then, of course, fights broke out in different locations, some resulting in broken bones, as well as someone getting trampled in the frenzy. So, police were called in for crowd control, and it was so chaotic at some locations that the employees wouldn't even allow people to choose their doll. They would just have to give them out to try to minimize fighting.
We've been out here since midnight last night. And the manager told us that we will be handed a doll, we will not be able to pick what we wanted, and everybody should be happy. Now, the first ones that were in, which were here, they had to take what they got. I got a boy, I wanted a girl. Now, all the other ones are allowed to pick what they wanted.
I have a boy and I can't.
And he just won't pay any attention to us.
He's telling us to take time out. 8 hours with our children standing out here. 8 hours.
8 hours with little kids that we spent to get these dolls.
And not that we got it on a sale price either.
They're not happy. And they're not.
At one store, the poor manager said that he was in fear for his life, and so he had brought out the baseball bat, and that's that iconic clip of him with that bat. So these incidents would come to be known as the Cabbage Patch riots of 1983. And it's almost unreal that this can happen, but then I think about it for a little bit longer and I'm like, it is America. And then the marketing definitely helped in creating this craze. You know, there was the gimmick of the doll being a real baby that came with these adoption papers and everything. The company also claimed that each doll was unique, no two were alike. They held some mass adoption events also in the country. And then besides that, there were a lot of TV advertisements happening. And this was the 80s. There's no like phones to be on or anything. So kids were hooked to the TV, seeing these advertisements. And then also the dolls have been featured on multiple news segments in different networks. So throw all of that together and the fact that it was the holiday season and when supplies are down and the demand gets high, of course, people just went into a frenzy to try to get these dolls. Now let's take a look at the Cabbage Patch Kids themselves. So Coleco was the first to mass produce and distribute the Cabbage Patch Kids in 1983, but there's been 7 companies in total who have sold them. So there's Coleco, Hasbro, Mattel, Toys R Us, Play Along, Jakks Pacific, and then Wicked Cool Toys is the most recent. Okay, sorry for the lighting change. I'm not actually sorry, but just wanted to point it out because that's what you do. But look, this is my Cabbage Patch Kid that I ordered off of online. I sound like an old person off the internet, off the webs, and she's really, really cute. I got her from a nice seller who had like a little note that she wrote, and she said that she named the doll Christine, and she's lived with her for 40 years, and I named her Clementine Lee. Because that seems like a Cabbage Patch Kid name to me, and I think she's really, really cute. She came in a little tracksuit, which I will put a picture of. I did buy this outfit for her, which I think is really, really cute with her little chubby legs. So anyways, I wanted to show them off, and yeah, I'll put this in here. So, supposedly, like I said, no 2 dolls were the same. They all came with different clothes, which I think is pretty cool. A lot of people thought they were ugly. Even, I believe, the vice president of the company said that they were ugly. But even that was kind of marketing because they said that ultimately they wanted the dolls to look vulnerable, right? So people would want to care for them. And also, people aren't perfect either. Like, we have imperfections. So, and clearly this marketing worked. And so I should mention the FBI now. So in 1984, they investigated and seized thousands of counterfeit dolls that were being sold across the United States. A lot of the counterfeits had a strong kerosene smell to them, which may have been from the chemicals that were used when shipping the dolls to try to preserve them and keep bugs and pests away. So there was a woman who called officials reporting that her fake doll had gone up in flames. And so they wanted the public to know that these counterfeit dolls may be toxic. They did end up doing lab tests though, and they came back saying that there weren't that many toxins and chemicals on the dolls. So I don't know. But anyways, there was a lot of counterfeit dolls being sold. And so the police and the FBI got involved to seize all of these dolls that were being brought into the US. Okay, so actually, I found an article from 1985 in the LA Times, which reported that more than a dozen children at Neil Armstrong Elementary School received brushes and first-degree burns that they had to get treatment for after they touched the stuffing of a counterfeit Cabbage Patch Kid. So apparently, the kids, they were playing with it at recess. I guess the head popped clean off and stuffing fell out, and so they were trying to restuff it. And when they did that, they started having this allergic reaction to the stuffing, and some had first degree burns, according to the principal, Bruce Shire. And then the dad of the kid who had the doll that was brought to school, he said he bought what was called a Patch Kid. So he bought the Patch Kid thinking it was real because it was $48. And now I I don't want to call dad's integrity into question, but was it $48, sir? I'm joking. It probably was. They said it was for Christmas time at like a boutique, so maybe it was marked up, but I'm joking around. But yeah, so the principal was saying that they have a day where they allow kids to bring the Cabbage Patch Kids to school because they're so popular. And as a side note, he even said how popular they are amongst the boys, which, just isn't that common at the time. So I thought that was a testament again to the marketing of the dolls. But yeah, so he was like, yeah, I don't think we'll be having that day anymore since this accident. The Consumer Product Safety Commission said that they had done those tests, like I said, and they came back showing that there wasn't sufficient amounts of chemicals to create this reaction. And it's like, okay, well, tell that to the kid that had the first degree burns who can no longer bring their Patch Kid to school to recess now. So that was kind of a detour. So back to the real Cabbage Patch Kids. Of course, each doll came with their own individual birth certificate and name, adoption papers. Also, I believe if you mailed in to the Cleveland Hospital or wherever the company headquarters was, they would send out a birthday card on the Cabbage Kids' birthday. The dolls came in this bright yellow packaging with the Cabbage Patch legend on the back of it and the quote on the front saying, "I'm unique, I'm adoptable," which stood out amongst other toys. I think the packaging was really cool and it was really big, so it definitely took up a lot of shelf space. There is the signature from Xavier Roberts on the left butt cheek of every doll, and you can actually tell what year the doll was released based on the color of the ink. Besides that, they also put the year usually on the packaging. So there were both boys and girls released initially, which I find kind of interesting too, because I don't know how popular that was at the time for boys to be getting dolls. But I guess in this case, they were kids, so it's a little different. Some were bald, some had full heads of hair. They had different skin tones as well. And then later on in the 80s, they also started selling preemies, which were basically premature babies, as the name would suggest. And that was certainly a choice. They also had twins that would come together in one package. And of course, because of how popular the line was, they did sell them overseas as well. Now, besides the kids, they also sold these creatures called kusas, and they were like a hybrid animal and Cabbage Patch baby. I'm not sure if they were supposed to be hybrid things, but that's what they look like. I think they were supposed to be pets. So actually, yes, they were supposed to be pets, and they do have their own lore too. So it said that one day the Cabbage Patch Kids saw a friendly stork named Colonel Casey, and he was carrying a mysterious bundle as he was flying over the patch. And so the kids, they gathered around, and then they were amazed to see two of the cuddliest creatures ever. And Casey explained that he had found them scared and shivering because of a flood that took place in Waikusa Valley, and he'd need to hurry back to rescue the other kusas. And so the kids had not seen them before, but they had heard tales of the kusas in that area who would bring good fortune. And there was even a rhyme for them. Kusas are not born and bred to be all brown or black or red. Oh no, you see, it's just not so. They found a better way to go. A very special, loving breed. They become a friend to all in need. The kusas came also with their own little ID tag, and you could register them and give them, your own unique name. But anyways, I find them really weird and kind of endearing also. They also had world travelers who were cute, and each one of them, went to a different country, so they had different clothes and accessories from those countries and culture.
I would be honored if you and Sadie Ann visited my home.
Now there are special Cabbage Patch Kids called World Travelers, and they come dressed in the clothes of the country they like best.
Reverse, please.
Here they are.
They they all have official U.S. passports with their own numbers.
Cabbage Patch Kids.
And all World Travelers come with special clothes, tote bag, t-shirts, and travel information.
They came out with corn silk kids that grew from corn instead of cabbages, and they had this softer hair that you could play with more easily.
An unusual thing happened recently. Some Cabbage Patch Kids were born with beautiful corn silk hair. Look, everyone said, you can wash and curl their hair and braid it and style it lots of ways. And they have their own brush they can hold. Seems as if they could have a different hairdo almost every day. And they always love to be loved, a lot.
Now, in 1985, they had clown kids. Well, actually not clown kids. I think the line was circus kids. And one was named Baby Cakes. He was a limited edition clown where only 2,000 were made. He is horrifying, but I also find him amazing. So yeah, they took my breath away when I first saw that. And I think if I saw them in stores or in like a thrift store, I'd probably keel over. So yeah, there wasn't just Baby Cakes. Like I said, they had Circus Kids, which was a line of different kids with clown masks and clown outfits. I didn't really find these that easily when I was looking up, different Cabbage Kids. So I think maybe, I don't know how popular they were, and also maybe people like collectively blocked that out of their mind, because I think a lot of people are probably fearful of clowns or don't really like them. But they might be my favorite because of how ridiculous they are. So I thought I would take an intermission to talk about some other really fun events that highlight the Cabbage Patch madness. So in the December of 1984 at a Calgary mall, they hosted this doll pageant that lasted over 3 hours in length. And when they organized it, they weren't sure how many people would actually turn up, but there ended up being over 300 doll entries in this pageant. And they had a real judge panel with Santa Claus, and they had contestants with a range of talents like breakdancing, tap dancing. There was a dancing number to fiddle music. And so I need to just play the news clip.
The first annual Cabbage Patch Kids pageant attracted 384 Cabbage Patch entrants, submitted by 274 real kids. It also attracted Calgary's mayor, Ralph Klein. He didn't have an entry. But some of these children entered as many as 6 of the $35 dolls.
Well, we certainly weren't expecting a crowd like this. It's just overwhelming. We're very, very pleased with the turnout. And of course, Cabbage Patch is popular, but we had no idea that we would have this many people here today.
The categories included Best Dressed, Most Original Costume, Most Talented, and an evening dress competition. The talent competition featured a lot of break dancers, some ballet dancers, and a number in the generally cute category. There was a big panel of judges and lots of entertainment. The contestants took it all very seriously. You're entering here, and what she got on?
She's the evening dress with a fur jacket, an evening dress with a corsage, and some shoes.
There may or may not be any great social significance in the fact that hundreds of people are willing to spend an entire afternoon on their feet at a doll beauty contest. But one thing's for sure, it won't hurt business at the Deer Valley Shopping Center this Christmas.
So that is super adorable, and that clip of a kid making his doll breakdance is gonna make me crack up at random times during the day in my life from here on out. And I'm sure that memory is forever burned into these kids' minds who competed at the pageant. So I just had to put that in there because I thought that was really really funny, and just highlights again how popular these dolls were in the 1980s. They also came out with a Rough and Tumble doll by Hasbro in 1992, and I think he's really cute, and I guess he was like marketed more towards boys again. They also had a Crimp and Curl doll and a pony that went with it, where basically you could play with the hair and do a bunch of different styles with it. I think some people didn't like those as much because of the kind of the residue that was on the hair to make it, stay in those shapes. But anyway, still pretty cool idea. They had a baseball line that was really cute, and their hands were made so they could hold stuff like little flags and whatnot. And those also seemed to be marketed towards boys more. In 1985, they also released an astronaut kid named Christopher Xavier. They said he was the first Cabbage Patch Kid to go to space. And so I was looking this up because I don't know if I'm stupid and I didn't know if he literally went to space, like if they put him on a mission or whatever, because sometimes they send things up for tests and whatnot. And so they make it seem like that is what happened. but then I don't know if that's like me taking it literal and they're saying that the doll went to space. I don't know. Anyways, I thought that was interesting. The release of the doll was unfortunate timing, given 1986. And I hate to evoke this man's name, but I believe Ronald Reagan met with them because he was trying to get more kids into STEM. Also, his wife was into Cabbage Patch Kids and believed giving them to kids. They ran like a cancer foundation or something. I'm not sure, but they met the dolls. But the packaging of the doll was really cool. And then around 1987, they released the first talking Cabbage Patch Kid. And then when Hasbro took over the doll line in 1989, they shrank the dolls down to 14 inches instead. And then Mattel also kept them smaller in the years after, from 1994 to 2001. In 1992, they became the official mascot of the US Olympic team, and they traveled with athletes to Barcelona, Spain. And then Olympic Kids came out in 1996 in honor of the Summer Olympics. And then there was the infamous Snack Time Kid that Mattel sold in 1996, which you could feed. And it was promptly recalled in 1997 after it ripped a young girl's hair from her head and injured some other kids too. Basically, anything that was put near the mouth of the doll would automatically start eating it. It would activate a motor so it could take it back and consume it. And then they had a backpack on it, and so the food would go into the backpack. And I guess allegedly, if you took the backpack off, it would turn the motor off, but there was no other like on and off switch, so you had to do that. But I imagine that's pretty hard to do when you're getting your hair forcibly ripped from your scalp. So unfortunately, they removed Snack Time Kid. Now, besides all of the dolls, they had accessories for everything. Like anything a real baby could have, you could buy for your Cabbage Patch Kid. So they had strollers, cribs, diapers, high chairs, those little like seat chairs that you could connect to the table so your kid could sit with you and eat at the dinner table. And then they also had accessories for real kids. So they had like these roller skates I found, which was super cool. I also came across a nightlight with like a Cabbage Patch coming out of cabbage, which was cool, and just other accessories like hair clips, pretty much everything you could think of. So it's kind of fun to scroll through eBay, taking a look at all of the different just accessories that they had from the time. So towards the late 90s and onwards, the dolls became more plastic, more vinyl, rather than like the full soft bodies that they had in the early 80s. And like I said, they shrunk them down quite a bit. But today, though, they sell multiple options. So they have the deluxe ones, which are bigger, and have the soft bodies, which are more expensive at around $80 to $90. And then they have toy kits, which are smaller and cheaper. So they tend to be more like vinyl, but they do have different options, like soft bodies as well. And then besides those, they do actually sell hand-stitched options like the old, soft sculpture dolls, which are the most expensive and also the most unique since they're handmade. So to circle back to the Babyland General Hospital, because I didn't talk a ton about it, which I'm still not going to, but it's existed, I guess, for over 40 years now and is considered the birthplace of the Cabbage Patch Kids. Alfred R. Kahn, who was the VP of marketing at Coleco, he said the following about it in a New York Times article in 1983. He said, "There, an artist named Xavier Roberts, who makes soft sculpture, had set up a truly different doll factory in 1977. He calls it Babyland General Hospital, and women dressed as nurses administer an adoption oath and supervise the signing of adoption papers for the dolls. Cigars are also handed out," which I didn't know about that, but that's pretty funny. Yeah, I had forgotten to mention, but when you go to adopt a Cabbage Patch Kid, at least in the past, I assume it's probably still the same, but the nurses would take you to a room where you would have to sign and pledge this oath to always take care of the baby and love it and everything, and then you would sign the adoption papers. So there are still the certified nurses, just like they were in the 1980s, and they deliver the babies and, put on this show for visitors. Okay, so to conclude, I have mixed feelings about the Cabbage Patch Kids that we know of today and how they came to be. I mean, I think it's messed up and quite frankly unethical that Xavier Roberts did not give proper credit to Martha when he initially started making these soft sculpture dolls and selling them when she was no longer supplying them. And I didn't really mention it, but he was an art student at the time, so he was only 21, and he did have some quilting experience, but he was not aware of the soft sculpture technique. He said that he learned that from Martha. Apparently, I think it's in the lawsuit, like settlement, that he's supposed to give credit to her for the idea, at least. So he does give that in that $1 Billion Babies documentary, where he says he did get the technique from her, and if there was no Martha's doll babies, then there probably would be no Little People and then no Cabbage Patch Kids. Now, truthfully, Martha probably never would have conceded or agreed to the mass production of her dolls in the first place, because she was not behind that commercialization. She wanted it to be, a heartfelt, real artwork that she would give. I don't know why I'm blanking. But even if she hadn't, I think there just would have been more integrity had he actually been more honest about what he was doing, or giving her credit for that early on. But he, pretty much said it was his own idea, and he came up with that technique, or learned the technique anyways, but he didn't say where he got it from. And I imagine if I was Martha and some 21-year-old kid came up to me and asked for my dolls, and I showed him a bit of the technique and everything, I would not be happy. I would be really upset to suddenly see them being sold. I think in the Vice documentary, they said that how they found out is someone came up to Martha and they were like, hey, it's cool to see your dolls being sold in the Georgia airport. And Martha was like, my dolls are not being sold in the airport. And so then they realized, the idea had been stolen at that point. So yeah, Martha's husband, he said it was just important to Martha that she had the recognition over the idea of the dolls. And so I want to make sure I'm doing that. And hopefully I've adequately recognized her life's work and given it proper credit. And now, all of that said, the Cabbage Patch Kid marketing was definitely unique in the sense that they had that cabbage idea. They created the legend around it, which apparently he also didn't come up with that legend entirely on his own, and he made it with the licensing agent. They came up with it. But a ton of kids got to enjoy them. They hold a lot of special memories for these kids, as we saw with like the pageants that they had, and all of this. So I think it brought a lot of joy to many, many kids during this time. And I don't think I'll ever have an original doll baby, probably. So this is as close as I'll get for now. Person who had, that Cabbage Patch Kid, Christine as they named them, had them for 40 years. They clearly cared about them a lot, and it, was special to them. So there is kind of still a positive side in that way, that a lot of people got to enjoy them. It just would have been nice had credit been given from the beginning, and if he had made it his own idea and not taken that idea. So yeah, hopefully this was interesting as a video, and like I said, hopefully I gave proper credit to Martha Nelson Thomas's doll babies and the history of all of that. And I didn't go over every single Cabbage Patch Kid line, because I just think that would be a little bit boring for me anyways. I like the ones that I talked about. So yeah,